Hello all, I'm Kishan, co-chair of the Insurance Cultural Awareness Network. Thank you so much for joining us today. We've got some great panelists and we're here to talk about everything that you wanted to know about race but were too scared to ask. Just a little bit about ICAN. ICAN is the Insurance Cultural Awareness Network. We've been going for the last 3 years. We facilitate multicultural inclusion across the insurance industry. I just want to give a shout out to all of my other committee members as well. So effectively, this event is a safe space. It's all about race. Anything that you want to ask, you can ask. We're using Slido today, so please, any questions that you've got, you can stick them up on Slido, and we'll be asking those to our panelists later on. Just want to let you know, one caveat, that this is an hour slot, so it's a great starting place, and we will want to continue this conversation with our network members later on throughout the rest of the year. So just to remind you that this event is also being recorded. I'm going to hand over now to Felix, who will introduce you to our panelists.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thanks, Kishan. And thank you for joining us, everybody. First of all, I'd like to introduce our panelists. So first of all, we've got Rukhsana Baiji, who's Diversity and Inclusion Leader with 9 years of industry experience in professional services and higher education. And Rukhsana recently joined Google to lead the D&I agenda across Google's EMEA technology business. Previously, Rukhsana worked at EY as a management consultant supporting organisations to achieve their D&I ambitions. And in the last year, she's worked with executive level teams in the public and private sector to build inclusive leadership capability, lead on D&I strategy build. And she's also developed sponsorship programs to support the progression of women and ethnic minority individuals, and has delivered cultural intelligence programs. Buki Masaku is an author, consultant, speaker, and founder of Rosacad and the Diversity think tank. Over the last 20 years, he's trained thousands of insurance personnel across the entire industry. He's a licensed coach and has been asked to share his expertise on sales, business development, and staff motivation across a variety of media, such as BBC. During a 34-year insurance career, our final panelist, Paul Handley, has held senior positions at various multinational underwriting and broking firms. In 2011, he founded utalkinsurance.com, a business that's since gone on to become the UK's leading insurance news and thought leadership content aggregation website for insurance and risk professionals. So just to start us off, I'd like to just acknowledge that this is really complex stuff, but it's great that you're joining us today. It's worth, I think, saying that no one has a monopoly on the truth, and I hope we're going to hear a variety of views that reflects just how complex this area is. So I'm going to jump right in at the deep end and address this question firstly to Rukhsana. So how do you talk about the topic of race if you don't want to offend someone when discussing this?
Thank you, Felix, and thanks for having me here today as the only person not in insurance. Definitely feel like an outsider, but it's great to be here with you all. So the topic of race, we tend, and when I say we, I mean specifically in the UK, we tend to avoid it. It's almost conflict avoidance, and we don't talk about race. And primarily it's because we're uncomfortable. We don't want to say the wrong thing. And I genuinely believe with most individuals, it comes from a place of good intent. So they don't want to talk about race, so they just don't have the conversation. But actually not having the conversation means that individuals are then complicit in racist behaviors and actions and outcomes. So the avoidance of the conversation is being complicit. So when individuals, and I've done a lot of training on having race dialogues in the last couple of years, and whenever I encourage individuals to start the conversation, that really is the starting point. Get that conversation started, create safe spaces where you can have a conversation about race. And I call it a ZOOD. It's a term called zone of uncomfortable discussion. So create that zone. Let whoever the individual is, whatever the context is, whether it's teams or individuals, let them know that you're curious and you want to learn and you want to know more. So whatever it is about race that you want to know about, or have a conversation about, start that conversation with curiosity, empathy, and with a view to listening. The key behavior there for me is always curiosity, the same curiosity that children have. Think of a 5-year-old asking those curious questions. Why is that person black, mummy? Or why is that person got piercings all over their face? Or, you know, whatever the curious question might be, start with curiosity, but make your intent known in advance.
Thanks, Roxana. And Buki, I saw you nodding intensely there.
Yeah.
What would you like to add?
Well, you know, being a sales guy, you know, the whole curiosity thing, I'm really big on that, and I think it's one way of illuminating the truth around these areas. So I definitely agree. I also think, though, it's very important that you do speak. If you have that feeling, if you for whatever in fact, first of all, I think it's very important to examine your motives. Why do I want to talk about race? What does it mean to me? Do I want to make my microcosm of the world a better place? And if that's the case, then okay, that's my reason. I think you have to have genuine reasons to have the conversation in the first place. There's a lot of people who jump on the trendy bandwagon. It's a big thing to talk about nowadays, and people are just talking for the sake of it. I read an article in The Guardian recently, and the author of the article was well-meaning, but I felt it was lazy, and I felt what he was trying to do was just capture attention and just show that they're in on it. They're in on this whole Black Lives Movement thing. I think it's very important to examine your motives. I also think if you're a white person and you want to have this type of conversation, I think it's important to suspend your preconceived ideas, because when you come into this type of space and you're having these kind of conversations, understand that your worldview will be governed by what you've lived, and it's not, it's limited. So it's very important to not, if you're going to have a conversation, don't come into it with preconceived ideas. And I'm not saying that everybody does that, but some people might think I'm talking about race, I'm going to talk about Black people, and they'll have a view of them, or as if all Black people are exactly the same. They're not the same. They come from different backgrounds, different religions, etc. So they have a different way of looking at the world. So I think it's important to take that into account. But I think it's important for people to speak. That I think it was. I think the worst thing is to keep quiet. If you feel that you want to say something, I think you should come from a place of inquiry. And if you don't speak, even if you feel you're going to upset someone, the chances are you will upset someone because you can't please everybody. But the impact of not speaking is far greater than speaking. So if your fear is I'm going to offend someone, I'd rather somebody offend someone unknowingly than just keep quiet. So please do speak.
Thanks, Buki. And Paul, you and I have had discussions privately around this subject. I know it's something which is very close to you. So how have you raised those kind of discussions in the past?
Well, I think one of the things that happens is I think there's a great nervousness about people, particularly in the current environment, and I suppose cancel culture as well, about people feeling that they may be clumsy. I happen to believe that the milk of kindness tends to run through most of us. But I think there's sometimes a nervousness about that clumsiness. I think Buki makes a great point about the worldview. And I'm a 52-year-old white man. And when I think back about the upbringing I had in terms of, not my parents, and they were very progressive, they were immigrants themselves, but the media bombarding me from all of these things, all sides. It's no small wonder that people have some of there's a nervousness, a lack of open-mindedness. I was presented as a 13-year-old boy in the grammar school I went to with a book called, and I'm not joking, called Europe Discovers the World. And I was offended by that as a 13-year-old. I guess there were loads of people in my class that were not offended by that at all. So I think trying to get people to that stage where they are more open-minded, and I think we've heard the use of the word safe space. I think people will be clumsy. I think it behoves all of us to give some people latitude, if that makes sense. If we know that give them the benefit of the doubt, if we know that they're trying. And it's our job as educators, I think, to help people along their journey.
That's really interesting, Paul. I wanted to pick up on this point that you mentioned. Obviously, the book Europe Discovers the World, and obviously, you know, that offended you. I'm just trying to think about this issue about unconscious bias, which is obviously quite big in the workplace, or is a big topic in the workplace at the moment. How do we address unconscious bias, and how do we call out microaggressions in the workplace? And I'd probably direct that question towards Bookie.
Yeah, I think it's a real interest of mine, actually, and I think there are a couple of ways. It's a big topic and there's not an easy answer, but I think there are a couple of things. The first thing I think, which is really important, is having awareness of unconscious bias. We are prone to unconscious bias. It's the shortest distance between 2 points in terms of making a decision. It's easy to just fall back on your conditioned view of the world and make a decision based on that. We tend to talk to people who are like us. We tend to do things with people who are like us. We tend to do things with people who we have been conditioned will do things in the right way. So we need to have an awareness that, we are, unconscious bias is real and we're all doing it to some degree, right? So that's really important. That's the first stage to trying to dissipate it, right? I think the other thing that we need to do is if we're aware of it, what can we do to get rid of it? So how can we reduce, in particular, since we're talking, or this is primarily aimed at race, minorities, Black people, how do we reduce it in relation to Black people? And I would say unconscious bias is different for each type of person. It's different to women than it is to men. It's different to people of an Asian minority and people from an Afro-Caribbean minority. What I would say is that I can speak from a Black perspective. Unconscious bias towards Black people, Black men, Black women, is very negative. It's extremely negative. It really is. And there are layers. It has layers to it. So it's complex as well. It's not something that you can just, unless you are a Black person, and it's very difficult sometimes to explain the nuances of unconscious bias. And so I think it's very important for people to be aware of that. Then the question is, well, how do you deal with it if that's the case? Well, I think you have to do what you can do in the position that you're in. So if I'm the head of a board, if I'm running a board, and I recognize that Black people are disproportionately underrepresented, I'm obviously, well, not obviously, but I think the thing that you should do is try and reflect that, in terms of the way that you recruit people. That's the simple thing. You don't have to, be tokenist about, just hire someone because they're Black, but just be aware of the fact that they're underrepresented and you're probably serving that community as well. So, try and make waves in terms of bringing those people to the table. So that's one thing you can do. The other thing is how to deal with it. And I think a lot of, in the moment, and this is my big area, I just don't think enough attention is allocated to dealing with unconscious bias in the moment. There's a lot of things going on which people are doing, at board level, structural level. But let's face it, on a day-to-day basis, when I'm confronted with what I believe to be unconscious bias, I need tools to deal with it. And I just don't think enough attention is allocated to that. So I was really happy when Roxana was talking about be curious in terms of approaching the issues of race. And I think in dealing with unconscious bias, you need to have the same approach. And the big area where I come from is come from if you feel that you've been a victim or you are a victim of unconscious bias, instead of what most people do is just get upset and don't say anything. So they just try and keep stiff upper lip, and don't say anything. But what that does is that it just causes this accumulation of negative feeling, this circular negative thinking. They go home to their families, they talk to their friends, other Black people, for example. They all say, yeah, I've had a similar thing. And you have just this circular thing going on, right? What I'd rather see people do is call it out. But then the question is, how do you call it out without chucking your toys out of the pram and being parental and annoying and getting yourself fired or something like that? So you have to have an approach. An approach that I encourage people is to come from a place of developmental inquiry. come from a place of developmental inquiry. Now, what does that mean? Well, developmental inquiry means I want illumination on the issue, right? And I just want, for my own development, I want to understand. And you have to come there without baggage, void of baggage. Even if you have every right in the world to have all the baggage that you think you have to come at it from a place of no baggage, because sometimes you're wrong. Sometimes it's what I call reverse bias. Sometimes you think the person is unconscious bias to you, but they're not. So I'm a big one on coming from a place of developmental inquiry. And the simple way of doing that is just to say, I don't understand. That's all you need to say. This doesn't make sense to me. I don't understand. When you come from that perspective, the person will respond in kind, and you have to do it dispassionately. You can't sort of say, you have no idea what it is to be a black man in a white man's world trying to make it in corporate UK. That's really going to get you nowhere. I don't care what course they've been on, how zen they are, whatever it is, that's just not going to get you nowhere. Even if you've got the coolest manager there, who's on the receiving end of that they, you'll be paranoid about how they responded to that. So the key is to just come with no baggage and just, if you didn't get that, I don't know, glam project, for example, you could just say, look, just for my own development, I'd really like to understand what the criteria was for that project, giving that project out. And then the person will tell you. And now you're into a developmental inquiry conversation. So I think the key here is to come from a place of developmental inquiry. And then managers on the other side who need to be open to developmental inquiry. I call it MODE. I call it MO2DE. Yeah, management open to developmental inquiry. They need to be open to the developmental inquiry because when you're open to developmental inquiry, you can have a constructive, collaborative conversation. And also, managers need to take the same IDU approach. I don't understand, right? When you see someone who you feel is feels that they are a victim of unconscious bias, and the reality is that they're probably just not good at their job, or there are other factors. You can also say to the person, because it's an energy thing as well, you can feel it. You can say to the person, look, I see you feel a bit uncomfortable about what happened with this role. I just want to understand a bit better. I don't understand what your angst is, and I'd really like if you could just let me know. And then you're into that open discussion. But if you don't have these types of discussions, what will happen is that either side will feel negative in some way, and it just accumulates, and then it creates what I call hidden racial tension. It's hidden. There are conversations that you don't know about, but they're happening in people's houses. And people will feel that, this is something we have to deal with.
That's really interesting.
It's not something you have to deal with. It's something that you can collaboratively sort out if you have the tools to do it. So I think I'm just talking to managers and everybody out there listening, try and come from a place of developmental inquiry in dealing with what you perceive to be unconscious bias, because it's not always the case. And if you come from that place, you'll have a constructive conversation which you can then move forward in an upward trajectory. And over time, it will reduce the likelihood of these things happening, because one of three things, and I'll end on this point, one of three things will happen. One is that the unconscious bias, through this kind of developmental inquiry, will call itself out. It'll just call itself out, and it'll be obvious. And then you can take steps collaboratively to sort it out, right? The other thing that will happen is that it'll become clear that there is no unconscious bias at play, that actually, I'm just using a crude example, the glam project that you didn't get, you shouldn't have got, because you weren't, for whatever reason, you weren't good enough, or you weren't the right person, whatever. Or the third thing will happen, which is that actually there's a completely different problem. There's other factors contributing to what you perceive to be decisions which are driven by unconscious bias. And as a result, in all of those scenarios, you can deal with them. But if you don't have any tools, which is what I think most people don't have at the moment, what happens is that these issues keep happening. They experience unconscious bias, it keeps happening. They wait for 3-4 weeks later. There may be a safe space time where they can have this kind of conversation, but that doesn't take away the angst. We can hug it out, have town halls, cry, and do all of those things, but which is great. But then what happens afterwards? So my thing is try and deal with it in the moment. And the way to deal with it in a moment without losing your shirt and getting annoyed at everybody is to come from a place of developmental inquiry.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Roxana, I'm quite interested to
see I'm very enthusiastic about this point.
You are very enthusiastic, which is great to see.
Yeah.
I just wanted to direct the second part of my question, which is how do you call out microaggressions in the workplace? What are your thoughts on calling it out? Because I'm very aware, I'm a lawyer and there's a hierarchy in my firm, so I'm very aware of that issue when it comes to calling out, you know, injustices that I do see in the workplace. So Roxana, how does one actually balance that when at work?
Yeah, I think that's one that's been really challenging historically. Microaggressions, as we all know, are those small everyday behaviors, actions that can feel like 1,000 cuts. Sometimes it's described as 1,000 cuts that over time will impact your personal experience of your organization, impact your well-being. And those historically, I think, have been really difficult to call out, because how do you, and even with an ex-colleague, he was a black male, and he said, oh, so these things actually happened. I thought it took time to register, but it happened. And by the time it registered, it was too late to call it out. And I thought it was in my head, but it really did happen. And so quite often when they happen, they could be, you don't even realize that it's happened, or you may reflect on it later. I think with the moment that we're in right now, with Black Lives Matter, with a real focus on racial equity in organizations that have never had it before, it provides an opportunity, but also a platform for individuals to use their voice and recognize that they have a voice and agency to share. And depending on your own organization, that might be through a medium or not listening sessions, particularly because I'm not generally a fan of those, but whatever the medium is in your organization, it may be a website where you can register things that have happened anonymously, if that's what you prefer to do. It may be in conversation with the individual, pulling them aside if you're comfortable to do that. But again, I'd probably want to emphasize where you have experienced unconscious bias, or quite often I think it's conscious. I think let's just call it out, it's conscious bias, it's racism. Quite often, if you've experienced that, if you're able to have the conversation with the individual, do it. But self-care is most important. So if you are a person of color who has experienced these things and you're not able to call it out yourself, I think self-care and being kind to yourself is a priority. If we've heard the expression a lot in the last few months, you can't pour from an empty cup. So if your cup is okay and you are okay, have that conversation if you're able to. If not, there are other channels. For anyone that's around you, really focusing on kind of don't being a bystander. So even if you notice a microaggression as a bystander, don't be a bystander. You're in that position to know when something feels like it doesn't sound right. Or, you know, I've had people in the past say to me, oh, after I speak somewhere, you're so articulate. And it's like, what did you expect? Because I'm a brown woman in a headscarf, clearly you had different perceptions, but the way you've just said that to me has been really demeaning. So I've quite often made a joke of it back to them, but let the individual know at the same time that that was quite unacceptable, or, you know, that I've almost challenged their perceptions of what they thought I should sound like as a brown woman in a headscarf.
Can I say something?
Yeah, sure, Bookie.
Yeah, you know, I was thinking, but I love that example, and I think the way that you dealt with it, I would suggest is calling. I think with microaggressions, I think there are a couple of different ways in which you can deal with them. You know, I think the one way, which I really encourage, but I think again this needs to be taught. I just think that people on the receiving end of microaggressions, unconscious bias, have to be where they have to get into the habit of trying to deal with it in the moment. You know, people might think it's all very well me saying that I'm confident. Well, we need to get people to that level of confidence. But I love the example that you gave, and I just want to cite it because really what you're doing there is you've made a quick decision that this is, whilst you might find it offensive, it's an informal, it's a light kind, it's offensive, but it's light. So you can respond in kind and address it in the moment, in the way that you did, right? And I think people need to categorize microaggressions. Otherwise, we're just going to be spoiling our lunch, you know, because these things are going to happen all the time. And, you know, I'd rather have a nice lunch than let it screw up my day, excuse me, right? So we need to categorize them, and we need to have different approaches. So one of the approaches that I encourage people to have as well is to give people the benefit of the doubt. Sometimes people aren't coming from a sinister place. Sometimes people are just saying what they feel, right? So give them the benefit of the doubt, but call it out. You know, that would be my first tactic around there, which I think Roxana did in that situation. But I would also say categorize microaggressions.
Buki, I'd like that point. That's a really good point for me to bring in Paul around that, because I think there are some lessons that I guess allies can learn around this. So, Paul, would you like to speak about how you would address that kind of thing?
I would be far more. I'm sorry to say this and maybe disagree slightly. I think the responses I've heard are highly educated. I respect all of the things that have been said, but I think we're being a bit soft on this. Yes, I think most people are a bit robust. I think even Kishan, you mentioned about hierarchy within your law firm, and striking a balance was the word you used.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think that is an excuse for people being racist. And actually, that's the word we've got to use, because that's what it is. And I think, picking up on what Buki said, I think if about grading, you can go to DEFCON 5 every single time you have an issue. And I certainly have found that living with my 3 teenage daughters and my wife in lockdown. You know, past assault turns into a different thing. But all I'm saying is that I think you can have a big fight over every single issue. I think grading is vitally important. Microaggressions, yeah, Buki gave a far more detailed answer than the one I'm going to give, but I certainly think it's the kind of thing where you can pull someone to side. It may well be they had no idea and they're not actually consciously being racist. And I think there's an education informed thing here. And I've actually done this myself to friends. And the biggest sense I got back from them when they did pause to listen was I just stopped talking, because the biggest sense I got back from them was a sense of embarrassment. They were kind of embarrassed and ashamed. And then knowing that I made my point, I didn't push it too hard. I didn't run to HR. Obviously, we don't have HR departments with our friends. But, and in all of the examples, and these have been examples throughout my whole life, I've seen my sense is people have responded really well. And if they clearly don't and they want to make an argument about it, then it is something that gets elevated. But I don't think striking a balance is really, and I'm not living in cloud cuckoo land or a fantasy land where everyone gets on and everything's perfect. I don't think striking a balance, I think that's almost feeding the problem. And I think with allies in your own workplace, Kishan, if you find that happening, you should be leaning on those people and asking for their support. And I'm sure that it's there. But I honestly think, I also think there's a part of the way the conversation is had. When people, if I admonish someone straight off the get-go, immediately their natural human instinct is to put their defense shields up. Because I haven't met too many people yet to like to admit that they are wrong or they made a mistake. So I think using what Buki said there about understanding, help me understand something, is a far more consultative way. And as I say, I'm convinced, in certainly all of my experiences in both my personal life and the workplace, my experience is that 9 times out of 10 or 99 times out of 100, people are more embarrassed that you've pointed it out to them. And the beauty of that, and it's something I'll come on to when I do my bit, is I think we then have an evangelist on our side, somebody else who will then call that out. And I just think this acorns and oak trees thing will then spin out from there.
Paul, do you want to talk a little bit more about that? About, you know, how as an ally can you use your voice most effectively at this time?
Well, I think for me, the allyship thing is, for me, it starts at the very beginning, and it's something that unconsciously I've done all of my life, but the more recent narrative has given me a greater framework around it. But it's about actively listening and appreciating and learning and empathizing. I'd be really clear on this. I think I've mentioned I'm a 52-year-old white man. How on earth could I ever understand what it means to be a BAME person? So I'm committed, and always have been, on a continuing journey to educate myself and others. The good news is I think we've reached something of a tipping point. But to really kind of capitalize that opportunity, I think white people need to be more switched on. They need to be actively anti-racist. Of course, white privilege exists. Anyone who denies that hasn't actually quite understood what it means. And I would suggest, in many instances, feel threatened because they don't understand what it means. I mean, I was looking at the John Amici thing he's done for BBC Bite Size. I think it's a school thing for kids. 2.5 minutes for any doubter around white privilege, of the best 2.5 minutes they'll probably spend this year, if not in their lifetimes, understanding what that means. Being an ally, though, isn't, I don't think, about the grand gesture. You know, I don't know, like a footballer waiting on a pitch for that pass to come to him where he or she scores the most beautiful goal. Yes, it's about doing the things daily. And I think when the subject was mentioned about 1,000 cuts by Roxana, I think that's exactly it. The daily little things, challenging daily little things. And the aggregate of those actually add up into quite a big thing. Yes. And that's where I think allies just don't be passive. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to throw over to our network HQ, and I think we've got some questions that are coming through on Slido.
Thanks, Felix. I'm just going to share the. I'm just going to share my screen so everyone can see how to get onto Slido first, and then we can show some of the questions. Hopefully, everyone can see that. So the first question. So the way to get onto Slido is to go slido.com, and then we need to use the hashtag ICANN. And then that should just take you straight through to the questions. You can submit them anonymously, and if you want to leave your name, that's fine too. There's a thumbs up kind of option, so if you like a question, you can press thumbs up, and it'll get a higher rating. So we'll address those first, and then lastly, please bear in mind that we are running on a bit of a delay. So if you've seen a question get removed, it might be because we've answered it, but you haven't quite got caught up with us on YouTube yet. So please don't panic. So the first question, I think, as you can see on the screen, is what's the best way to respond to a colleague making a mildly racist comment, as opposed to one which is clearly and unambiguously racist. And I think we've been kind of talking about the issue for a little while now, so I think I might just drop that one off. But if we go to the next one, I think I want to be mindful of people's ethnic heritage, but asking where do you come from is wrong. How can I ask people what their heritage is in a better way? And Roxana, as you're top of my screen, would you like to answer that one?
Yeah, happy to. And it's one which I struggled with as a teenager myself from my own personal experience. But what I always say to people, again, with that curiosity lens, in the way that question is phrased, I think asking the question around what's your cultural heritage, tell me about your cultural heritage. That's a really simple way, and you've kind of answered that question in there, but it's definitely much more palatable and breaks up the stereotypes and doesn't create a kind of a lack of belonging, which is what comes into play when you say where are you from.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, Roxana. I think that we've also had it mentioned here today that I think there is a responsibility on people of colour to not necessarily kind of go into that rage mode and thinking, well, what's going on here? Because it could be curiosity which has been clumsily expressed, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And when I was younger, I definitely went into the if someone asked me that, I'd say Lancashire, and then say, if they said, but where? And I'd say Preston, Lancashire, and I refused to say what my cultural heritage was, because I just felt the fact that they were asking me that questioned my belonging in a particular situation or space. So just simply rephrasing it slightly. And obviously, as I've got older, I engage with the question regardless of how it's said, just to have the conversation.
Sure.
Can I just say something on that?
Go
right?
with
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I think it's, I think in answering it, I think one has to look at one's worldview, because to me, I would have no problem answering that question. To me, it just wouldn't be an issue. But that might be down to my own background. But I think also, I think if somebody says to you, where are you from? And you're a brown-skinned person, I mean, also there's a burden on you not to always see everything as like some kind of offensive question. Tell them, say, I might say, yeah, I'm from West London, Notting Hill Gate. My heritage, I'm of Nigerian extraction. I mean, that's what I would say. So I think we need to also find the balance. We need to find the balance of, we are. Look, we are minority. I'm not going to be if I go into a company to do some work, right? The likelihood is that there's going to be less people that look like me and more people that are Caucasian. So, I just think we don't want people just walking on eggshells for the sake of walking on eggshells. So I just think it's finding the balance. I just think it's very important that we find the balance. I just wanted to say that on that question. Don't want to take up all the time. On that question, I just wanted to say that.
Thanks, Becky. Nick, do we have another question?
Yeah, sure. Is it okay to use the word black? Hopefully this will be a quick one. Who wants to comment on that?
Becky, go ahead.
I don't stand for all the, but for me, I don't know how else you would describe me. So, yeah.
Okay. So
for me, as a black person, I'm good with it.
Yeah, so on that one, I have been in sessions where there's been some individuals, and it surprised me, they said, no, they don't want to be labeled as black, they're African, or they identify as being Caribbean, from the Caribbean. So it's very personal. And again, it's the recognition that every individual is different. And as you've already heard, people will have different opinions and different feelings regarding particular terms. So always treating the individual as an individual.
Yeah, agree. In the States, they say African American. So you could say Afro-Caribbean if that makes you feel more comfortable. I guess.
Okay.
Thanks, guys. So I think the next one is quite an interesting one. I'll go to the second one because it looks interesting. I'm a manager and I'm white. If I witness a racist microaggression from one of my team, what is the best way of dealing in the moment without being a white savior? I think, Paul, you've not spoken for a little while, so maybe we'll shoot that over to you.
I'm not sure I quite like the idea of using the terminology white savior. I've never ever thought of myself doing the right thing. I'm not necessarily sure I deserve the round of applause, or I class myself as being a white savior. I would literally just tackle it. And it really is as simple as that. Pull the person to one side in a professional way, educate them around what they may have said, and try to understand the context of what they said and why they said it, and then put them right. I mean, as simple as that. But certainly, I'm uncomfortable with being seen as a white savior. I would substitute those words for doing the right thing and being a good person. And I don't think that is that's not a black, white, BA anything at all. It's being a good person.
There's a question there, Nick, about how important is confidence in having these conversations. If you're at the top of the totem pole, it's easier, surely. How would you encourage the next generation? Which one of you guys would like to take that? Maybe Roxana?
Sorry, can we have the question back on the screen? I can't. Is it on the screen? I think the confidence in having the conversation. I think going back to something probably triggered by what Paul said earlier about Kishan's point on hierarchy, I think a real recognition. So sometimes it's not even about confidence, it's recognizing where the power and privilege lies. So Paul, as a white male, is able to call out things because he already has this unearned privilege of being a white male and having that perceived credibility. So that naturally brings confidence. So in terms of a next generation, if this question is around encouraging the next generation in terms of people of color, or broader population, next generation, I think the more allies and white individuals, white families are talking about race, that will encourage that confidence. That will, if we're having those open conversations, difficult, really uncomfortable conversation on what race means and where your conscious or unconscious biases lie, that will help in terms of broader societal change and building that confidence.
And Roxana, you mentioned earlier, I picked up that you said that you're not a fan of listening sessions, and they are very much in vogue in a lot of organizations right now. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, it's been definitely running focus groups or listening sessions. I think it's been happening for a long time. I think organizations, when it comes to the topic of race, kind of default to listening sessions and focus groups, and they already have the data. So I come from a place of, we already have the qualitative data. We already know the experiences. Every organization's people surveys will probably be telling them the same thing. I've worked with a number of organizations, public and private sector, in the last year, and the story around ethnic minority individuals or the underrepresented groups is pretty much the same story in every organization. So for me, what I want to see in terms of organizations, or if you're in the majority group, start thinking about what you can do differently. We all know the story. So for me, it's about organizations taking ownership and recognizing in their systemic processes where bias exists and how they are going to unbias everything within their systemic processes to create that change. So not placing the burden on, for this particular instance, the Black individuals within your organizations, but actually taking ownership and accountability, because we all know the stories and they're not necessarily the realities as opposed to stories.
Roxana, do you think that's just, I think that's a fabulous point, incredibly well made. I think, and certainly makes me think, do you think that's just a smokescreen behind some kind of white organizations, white-led organizations, to almost tick the box, you know, where we've thrown some money at it, we've got some research, we're having a project on this, we're doing this, we're doing that, and because nothing is new. We've known this for a long, long, long time. And I'm always reminded of that Latin dictum, acta non verba, you know, we've had all of the words, we need some deeds now, concrete deeds. And it just seems that there is a roadblock because people still want to, you know, analysis paralysis, still kind of getting buried in the stats and the data when it's as plain as a nose on our face, the problem. So action, yes? Action,
absolutely. And you took the words out of my mouth. You can never have enough data when it comes to race. People always want more, and it is for protective hesitation around, okay, how do we move on? Or, you know, the data is not going to change unless we take the action. And even the word ally is a verb. So it's time for individuals to start doing the work and taking action.
Yeah, be the change you want to see, right? That's Gandhi says that. I think it's true.
Vicky, there's a really big question which has got a lot of votes here. As there are so many issues to tackle within organizations, how do we go about this and tackle all issues? It's a big question. Do you want to take that one first?
How do we, so thanks for giving me the biggie. Right? So what was it? How do we go about tackling
all the issues? I mean, there are so many.
I think, you know, Rome wasn't built in a day. You know, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. I think what we need to do as organizations is say, where do we have a propensity to display these, to fall short in our desire to be diverse and have equality and so on. You know, where do we fall short? Where do we have a high propensity to do that, and start there? I also think what you have to do is look at the values that you have as an organization, you know, and say, well, what are our values, you know? And then, you know, this Black Lives Matter movement has given us the opportunity to recalibrate the way that we look at our values and so on. And then say, what does, in light of our values, what does this mean? And then that will give you a direction from which you can start. So I think that's the way to do it. But you know, we have to say to our, you know, we have to be honest and say to ourselves, look, if we're having this global collective hands up, Black Lives Movement driven, think about the way that we're treating blacks. And I noticed that somebody here has mentioned Asian, but the reason I'm going on about it from a black perspective is that's what's driven this, if we're honest. Then I think the key thing is to take action. So, well, what can we do? You know, and there are small things that you can do. And for example, you know, just in the recruitment, I saw a question here about recruitment. You know, a lot of organizations are trying to do things where they encourage, and in particular insurance as well, trying to encourage more people from Afro-Caribbean backgrounds to get into different roles in insurance. You know, and one of the things I think they could do is be more aggressive. Being more aggressive. You know, before this, I looked at 5 different job opportunities, sales ones, because that's my work, right? Client-facing opportunities. And it had the flimsy kind of line, and I don't mean that disrespectful, just disrespectfully, but I think it is kind of flimsy. The line which says, we are an equal opportunities employer and we do X, Y, and Z, and we welcome this, and we use scientific ways of hiring people and all of that. Yeah, but that's fine. But if I'm a bit insecure about my ability to fit into a large corporate insurance company, you know, that's not really going to do much for me. What I'd rather see, which I did see from another insurance company, was they were trying to encourage people with disabilities to take the role. They bolded a statement, they have a statement bolded, and it said something like this: we will look at everybody that fits into the bare minimum criteria of this job. So my point is, why not do that for people of Afro-Caribbean origin? Why not do that for people of Asian origin? Why not do that for people of Middle Eastern origin? Why not? You know, it's positive discrimination and it sends a message. And guess what? Everybody's a winner here. It's not about, you know, giving one group more opportunity than another. Everybody's a winner here. You know, it was not Malcolm X, it was Dr. Martin Luther King that said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So by taking this approach, you're just improving your organization for everybody else. What would happen is that you would have tons of applications from people from Afro-Caribbean or whatever the Afro-Band, if you like, background. And what that would do is just increase the level of the quality that you've got. And we've all seen the McKinsey reports and so on about, you know, diversity and how it increases productivity, profitability, and all these things. So why not be more aggressive that's one area in recruiting people. I think we could be more aggressive. We don't want to get to the place where we're doing what I call greenwashing. You know, greenwashing. A lot of people call greenwashing with climate change. You know, you've got BP. They give like X amount of millions to the Royal Shakespeare Company and think, right, in the name of climate change, and they think, right, I've done it. No, we want to do pragmatic things that people can see. That if I'm a young guy, I've just come from university, 21 years old, I look down, I see ABC Insurance Company or ABC Investment Bank, and it says we are actively looking to hire people from this, or encourage, applications from people from this background. That's going to make a massive difference.
I want to bring Ruxana into that discussion as well. Becky, thank you. Ruxana, what's the first step?
I think first step is the commitment. I think many organizations have made the public commitment, to creating change, or if they haven't made it publicly, they're starting to do it internally. But then to kind of second that, how are you treating this? Are you treating it as a challenge and passing it to your diversity team to sort out or manage? Where I think organizations will have success is if they tackle racial equity in the same way that they tackle any other business challenge. So who do they have working on it? Who is accountable? And how are they managing racial equity? So to give you an example, how have organizations managed the shift to work from home with COVID and the challenges that COVID has brought? So in the same way that organizations have done that or tackled any other recession or downturn, in the same way, for me personally, for racial equity specifically, they need a similar approach. Manage it in the same way that you manage any other business challenge, with clear accountability from the top.
Thank you.
Felix, can I just cut in there? I mean,
sure.
One of the things I was going to say was the great question. The premise of the question is talking about it almost suggests the list is really long. Where do you start? And actually, none of these things, these action points, are mutually exclusive. I don't see the point in triaging them. Yes, in my business, if we have a problem, we go and tackle it. And to Roxana's point, we just get on with it. We need to treat it like any other thing. If you're a car manufacturer, how will you make your next car? Then make it. And I just think all this, I think once again, using that expression, analysis paralysis, it just is a question of a set of really clear, smart objectives, and get on with it. Yes, and set some aggressive deadlines, because my fear is that we're going to be having this conversation or conversation like it in a few years' time, unless we keep our foot on the gas of the people in charge who can make the difference.
Sure. Okay, I think we're going to move towards wrapping the event, because I'm conscious of our time. So I'd like to just ask each of you, maybe just if you could give us a minute. What's your kind of top message? What's your one takeaway that you would like to let the audience know about and to take away today? Paul, do you want to start?
Yeah, I think what I would say is we're living in times where change is a buzzword. None of us could have possibly forecast at the beginning of this year how we would have, where we would be today. Now, change for many people is frightening, threatening, it's difficult, it's tough. It really is really not an easy place. It's uncomfortable. And to change requires honesty. And that's white people being honest. It requires bravery, determination, fortitude, not giving up, carrying on, and many more virtues besides. But for me, if there's one thing that change gives us is opportunity. And in the context of our chat today, really, I think the main message is that the change I think we should all be looking to be is the one of educators and change agents. Yeah, it's simply not enough for each one of us to kind of just say to ourselves, well, we'll let somebody else do that. Now, first and foremost, it's absolutely up to white people to educate themselves. But as we've all seen, white folk haven't really been too good at doing that over the years. So they need help. And against that backdrop, I think it behoves each and every one of us to, in the course of our daily lives, to help educate and inform people.
Thanks, Paul. Roxana, what's your one takeaway?
I think for me, for any leaders or individuals managing in organizations, it's definitely a message of conscious inclusion. Lead with conscious inclusion in mind. Good leadership, any good leadership, mindful leadership will benefit from being consciously inclusive. So that's the key message for anyone leading organizations or managing teams. For any other, also for those same individuals, to Paul's point, there are a number of anti-racism resources out there. So from a kind of personal development perspective, we've been inundated with content in the last few months around what anti-racism means. And there's some really good things out there. So take the time, learn, do it in groups, do it with your families. It's a real moment in time where we can all engage and really sit up and take note of what anti-Blackness means. To that other question as well around Asians, that anti-Blackness is real, and it's something we need to tackle as a society.
Thank you. And Bookie, just a minute from you, please.
Okay, so yeah, I think there are a couple of things I'd like to leave with people. I think obviously we need to look at this from a number of different perspectives. Structurally, what can we do to change things? And I think people in senior management need to look at, consciously and actively look at ways in which they can create a more diverse environment. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, and I'll explain that, because of exposure, if you have exposure to people who are different, then obviously people being different becomes less of an issue. The second thing, which I think is really important, is equipping people with the skills, the tools to address these issues on a day-to-day basis. Because at the end of the day, right, it's the person-to-person communication and how good or bad that is, which will be the key determinant for making your people happy in their organizations and productive and winning teams. So I think it behooves senior management to equip all of their people, not just to help all minorities deal with these situations on a day-to-day, as well as the wider strategic and structural things that they're doing.
Great, thank you. I'm going to hand back to Kishan shortly. I just want to mention very quickly that this is the first of a number of events that we've got going on over the next few months. So we've got an event on the 9th of September, which is challenging recruitment bias. And I'm also going to mention very quickly Dive In. We have ICANN is running an event called Using Privilege for Good. And that event's taking place on the 23rd of September. I believe actually the tickets are now possibly sold out, but keep an eye out on our website for further details. With that, I would just want to thank you, panelists, for your time, and I'm going to hand back to Kishan.
Yeah, thank you, guys. I do want to just say thank you so much for giving up your time today to come and speak to us. I want to thank everybody that's logged on and has watched this. I hope it's been really helpful. I do want to mention that this conversation will be continuing throughout the rest of the year, if not next year as well. And in order for you to get involved, please sign up to become an ICANN member. Just go on our website, type in your email address, and then you'll become a lovely new ICANN member. I do want to just point out we've got a few initiatives that are running at the moment. So we have Inspire, which is an initiative which we've joined forces with the WCI and also with PwC. That's our mentoring scheme. So if you're out there and you're looking for a mentor in the insurance industry, sign up, become a member, drop us an email, and we can send you some more details on that. We also have ICANN Apply, which is our recruitment initiative, launched last year. We are looking to promote job roles across the insurance market to our members. So again, if you're looking for a new job with change of scenery, then please log on and sign up to becoming an ICANN member. And then we also have ICANN Voice, which is our podcast. I don't know if any of you have listened to some of them, but they're really great, even if I do say so myself. And just to reiterate, we are doing a couple more events. The Recruitment Bias Workshop will be in September, and also Dive In, which is using white privilege to, change things. And that's it, I think. I just want to say a big thank you again to everybody. We will be sending out a survey, so if everybody could complete that, just to let us know, what you liked about this event, what you disliked, so that we can make the other events more, better. And yeah, just reiterating, sign up, become a member. Thank you, guys.